You look at it, you can see even the insidious way that it was quote unquote partitioned. Of course, this wasn't even implemented because the Arabs revolted as soon as they were told that they were going to be ethnically cleansed out of their homes, as you might expect. It sparked a revolution and a subsequent expulsion. But you can see even the insidious way that the Europeans planned and drew the lines. They broke up Palestinian unity physically, and you can see how Israel is now this cancerous blob that is swallowing the host. And over time, that's exactly what happens. I mean, you can see the stages of development and they always knew, by the way, this is an important point, this was not enough for them. They were gifted an international birth certificate by the UN with the partition plan, which was formerly known as UN General Assembly 181, Resolution 181. And this was not enough for them. David Ben-Gurion at the time remarked that, yes, we're going to have to accept whatever the Europeans say, in this situation, whatever the UN gifts us, we'll formally accept it. But we know that this is just the starting point. And this is giving you, I'm paraphrasing, but this is exactly what he's saying. This is the starting point for us because we're not going to stop there. We all recognize that over time, we're going to have to completely consume the land and drive these people out. But at least we got our foot in the door, in other words. And you could say, clearly more than just a foot in the door. You've been given a Jewish majority in an Arab majority land. You've been gifted all of the arable, agricultural valuable land, and you've pushed the Palestinians into enclaves, essentially. And they have the indigenous majority now has a minority of their land, and the foreign minority now has a majority of the land. So in no way was UNGA 181 a moral document. And the other thing is that the Palestinians were never asked if they were never consulted about the partition plan, and they were denied even to have the ear of the king being the British Empire. They were denied. They tried to delegate. They formed 7 different Arab congresses. I love when Zionist turds try to tell us that there was no president of Palestine. Like they straw man and make it seem as though the Palestinians did not have their own political structures and social structures and society, basically. But the truth is, they absolutely did. They had a hierarchy. They had leadership. They had political, institutions. It didn't look exactly like a Western-style nation state. But at the same time, once they heard that, the British Empire had now inherited this land of Palestine, and they made it the mandate of Palestine, they then tried to plead to the kings. They really did try to do everything that the British Empire wanted, but the only thing that the British Empire wanted as a pretext for even giving them counsel, giving them airtime, giving them the time of day, was that they deny their own sovereignty, first and foremost. They must deny their own national and political rights, and then once they do that, then we'll listen. If you accept that, okay, then we'll talk to you. So Rashid Khalidi points this out in his book, The 100 Years' War on Palestine, that it was a catch-22 situation. What do you do in that situation? You're being gaslit. The very thing that you're asking for is the very thing you're being asked to deny, in order for you to even have the ear of the people that you need to talk to. So they gaslit them. There's a long history of complete fracturing of these delegations. There's all kinds of things they did. They would exile people. They would imprison these moderate dissidents, people that were actually trying to peacefully reform the land of Palestine, to stop the colonization, to interface with the British Empire in a way that the British Empire expected, and to speak the same language, the language of the king. It ended up not mattering, It's just, and you can find an analog to that in what the Americans did to the Cherokee Nation in, what is today like Appalachia, I think, Tennessee and all that area. The Cherokee were like, okay, we'll be the white man, basically. I'm not saying that the Palestinians were this extreme. It's not a perfect analogy, but if it was a perfect analogy, it would cease to be an analogy, right? So the Cherokee Cherokees tried to assimilate their way of life to fit the mold of their American colonizers in order to retain their national political rights, in order to retain their land, and it was still denied. Like they still went to war. It was intolerable for the Americans to accept this, no matter what. I mean, so they were still ethnically cleansed. It was a brutal war against them, and they were pushed into the Trail of Tears, which forced them into exile in Oklahoma. Of course, that ended up getting subsequently colonized despite the literal signed treaties from American presidents saying they wouldn't do that. That's exactly what they did. They could not stop the push for settlers moving west and colonizing further and further changing and normalizing these illegal settlements, and that's exactly what has happened in the West Bank here.